Hello, and welcome back to Storytime with Eric Zimmer. Last time I read about Sagamore Hill, I showed you what it looked like in pictures, mostly. Now we're actually going to read about the history of Sagamore Hill. A.k.a. Theodore Roosevelt's Summer White House by Bill Bleyer. Discover the story behind Theodore Roosevelt's favorite place on earth. No house better reflects the personality and interest of its owner than Theodore Roosevelt's cherished Sagamore Hill. I'm reading what it says on the back. After Roosevelt returned to Oyster Bay following the death of both his beloved wife, his first wife, Alice, and mother, he and his second wife, Edith, made the house a home for their growing and rambunctious family. What began as the perfect getaway from unhealthy New York City summers in his grandfather's day became the Summer White House during Roosevelt's presidency. He hosted political guests like Henry Cabot Lodge and cultural luminaries like novelist Edith Wharton. Roosevelt spent his final years happily at Sagamore Hill, and after his death in 1919, the Theodore Roosevelt Association and National Park Service preserved the house. Well, actually, they didn't do that until after Edith died in 1948. With previously unpublished photographs and a detailed guide to the house and grounds, historian Bill Bleyer recounts bygone days at Roosevelt's Haven. Now, today I'm only going to read the introduction, but this is an interesting book. So, you ready? Alright, let's begin. Excuse me. Introduction. Hours before he died at his Long Island home in the winter of 1919, Theodore Roosevelt is said to have turned to his wife and asked, "I wonder if you ever know how I love Sagamore Hill." His spouse, Edith Caro Kermit Roosevelt, and his 6 children shared that love of the hilltop house and the homestead of the same name in Cove Neck on Long Island. The tens of thousands who have visited the property since it was opened to the public in 1953 have loved it as well. That includes me. I actually got this from the museum on Old Orchard, the other house on Sagamore Hill, among other things. TR's house is more than just an attractive structure. It is one of the best examples of a home of a famous person that vividly illustrates the multifaceted personality of its owner. Sagamore Hill is solidly substantial, but unpretentious. It overflows with objects that reflect the limitless energy and varied interests of the 26th president and all of his roles. Politician and statesman, historian, soldier, hunter, conservationist, prolific author, and family man. Its cozy dining room, many bedrooms, and comfortable communal spaces are evidence of the importance of family as the center of Roosevelt's sprawling universe, and the need of the gregarious and curious host to surround himself with interesting guests. For most of my life, and this is Bill Bleyer talking, I have been one of those admirers of TR and Sagamore Hill. As a young boy growing up on Long Island, my parents took me to see the property and learn about the Renaissance man who owned it. The 3-story, 28-room Queen Anne structure, with its prominent gables, dormers, verandas, and massive brick chimneys, was certainly impressive. But I was even more enthralled with the animal trophies in the front hall and the north room, its entrance flanked by elephant tusks. While I had no interest in ever going big game hunting, as someone who loved books, I felt a kinship with the owner of the volumes filling the shelves of the library and the gunroom, and I was fascinated by the strange appearance of the old-fashioned claw-footed bathtub in the second-floor bathroom. Subsequently, I visited Sagamore Hill National Historic Site dozens of times, mostly covering stories for the Long Island daily newspaper, Newsday, over 3 decades, and more recently to research this book. But I have never lost the initial sense of wonder every time I walk under the porte cochere across the piazza and re-enter the world of Theodore Roosevelt. The house has been a National Historic Site since 1963 and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1966. Recently fully restored from foundation to roof, the 14,175 square foot structure encourages time travel back to the era of Roosevelt's presidency in the early 1900s. TR's family is the only one to have ever lived there. For 64 years, about 90% of the contents of the first 2 floors are original. Some of the 12 buildings, such as the farm shed and chicken house that stood during Roosevelt's time, are still there, if repurposed. Hundreds of books have been written about Theodore Roosevelt, his family, and their Long Island home. But all but one have focused primarily on the Roosevelts, with Sagamore Hill as a part-time setting for their fascinating lives. That one exception is the Roosevelt Family of Sagamore Hill, written by Herman Hagedorn, executive director of the Theodore Roosevelt Association, and published in 1954. It is a wonderful read, and many of its anecdotes are retold in this book. But Hagedorn's account is incomplete because it ends with TR's death. This book tells the full story of Sagamore Hill, starting with Theodore's grandfather discovering Oyster Bay as the perfect getaway from hot and unhealthy summers in New York City. It covers TR's decision to buy property nearby to build a home named Lee Home for his beloved first wife, Alice Lee. It picks up the story when Roosevelt returned to Oyster Bay after his Dakotas ranching sojourn following the death of his wife and mother on the same day. It recounts how TR's second wife, Edith, made the house built for another woman a home for herself with a growing rambunctious family. TR used Sagamore Hill as both a working farm and his political headquarters in his early days in government, and then as the summer White House. His widow kept the house and property almost unchanged until it was sold to the Theodore Roosevelt Association after her death. And finally, this work covers how the National Park Service assumed the legacy in 1963. Over the years, the agency has returned the house and grounds to a more historic appearance and finally closed what it had begun to call the Theodore Roosevelt Home to distinguish it from the homestead for 3 years for a major restoration. The $10 million project recreated the original light and air shaft running through the center of the house and a back porch. Historical features removed in early renovations when the house became a public museum, and it improved lighting to enhance the visitor experience. The book includes many previously unpublished photographs of the house and grounds along with a center insert guide to them. My hope is that this book will help readers understand why TR could write the following to his daughter Ethel in 1906. Fond as I am of the White House, and much though I have appreciated these years in it, there isn't any place in the world like home, like Sagamore Hill, where things are our own, with our own associations, and where it is real country. To be continued.